Good morning, everybody. My name is Gary Grote. I'm the Executive Director for the Greater East Aurora Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to our third Real World Careers Meet the Professionals presentation. We've done two other ones previously with healthcare careers, and then 2 weeks ago we met with Tim Clark, who was the commissioner, the film commissioner for the Buffalo Niagara Film Commission, and he talked about careers in the film industry with a number of studios that are going to be built here within the next 2 years that will attract different film productions. We know Western New York has been kind of a little bit of a hotbed lately, and so different companies are taking advantage of that. So we felt that there would be opportunities by having Tim talk. But today we have Pete Sergi, who's a senior employee engagement specialist for Moog, for the Space and Defense Group, who will be talking about Moog, the careers in Moog, but also his background too. But I just want to say, you know, our purpose in doing this is really to give an opportunity for students and for teachers and counselors to connect directly with individuals in various career industries, to provide a background and pathway to possible careers in that particular field. And so it's a great opportunity for you who are present here today to get that information directly from Pete, but also to interact and ask any questions that you might have. What I'd also like to do is thank Absolute Care of Aurora Park for being a sponsor of this program. We really appreciate their support in being able to be part of this and enabling this program to happen. So Pete, I'm just gonna kind of turn it over to you and thank you for doing this for us today. And I know you have a program and some information to share with us with a little bit about your background and on Moog and different career opportunities. So what if I turn it over to you? All set, Pete?
Yeah, I just couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. You know, for years we've used Skype, so all the Moog employees that are starting to get into Zoom or Teams, we're all clumsy. So it's all brand new. But good morning, everybody. My name is Pete Sergi. I've worked at Moog. Well, let me do this. I'll go through my bio, give you a little bit about my background, talk a little bit about what it's like to work at Moog, and some of the careers that we're going to be hiring for, and we are currently hiring for. We're doing quite a bit. So this is probably a good time if you're interested to come to Moog or maybe in the near future. So let me see if I can click through on my presentation here. So a little bit about me. I'm happily married, 21 years. I got 3 kids. This picture you see is when they were all young and cute. Now they're teenagers, so they're not as young and cute anymore. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm not from Western New York. Went to school in West Virginia, got a BA in English from West Virginia, and then I worked for the Walt Disney Company for 8 years, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Met my wife down at Walt Disney World. She's from West Seneca, so we moved and followed her back here. And this year I'll celebrate 20 years with Moog, and a lot of different roles, all of them in HR, but varying capacities with the varying operating groups here. And while I've been at Moog, I've had the opportunity to go back and get my MBA as well, so which Moog paid for, which was really nice. So really great company that I work for. So a little bit about my background. After I graduated West Virginia, I went to, I worked on this internship at Walt Disney World. It was like the coolest thing in the world. I had no idea that these things were out there. Summer '93, I was a lifeguard, Typhoon Lagoon. I was like, this is great. Who thought of this idea? Worked down there with other college students from all over the country and all over the world. Loved it so much. I had 1 semester left at school. I loved it so much that when I was getting ready to graduate with a bachelor's degree, my father said, so what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And I said, I'm going to go be a lifeguard for Disney, making $6 an hour. And my dad was like, you're going to do what? And so my mom, thankfully, was the one that was the practical one, and said, don't worry. He's got a plan. He's going to work his way up, which is exactly what I did. So I became a full-time regular at Typhoon Lagoon. I helped open up Disney's Blizzard Beach water park because I became an instructor and a lifeguard lead. So I started working my way up, getting into leadership roles within the organization early on. I helped work at Disney's wide world of sports, and I did sporting events there as well. I was a manager on the Indy 200. I was a manager on the Disney Marathon, and Disney used to host the Clay Court Championship. I was a sponsor event manager on that, so I did a lot of really cool things there. But probably one of the coolest jobs I had at Disney was this thing called a Disney ambassador. So it was a role that was created by Walt Disney himself back in the early 60s, because people wanted to talk to him and tell us about the parks, tell us about the movies, and he didn't have the time. And so he created this role where a person would basically speak on his and the company's behalf. And it was called a Disney ambassador, and they started it in the 60s in Disneyland. And when Disney World opened in 71, they started creating that role. It was always one person a year. It was always a woman. And in 95, they went to a team concept and they created Disney ambassadors as a team. And in 1998, you can see there on the lower left hand of the screen, myself and two other ladies, Jill and Cammie, were selected by the Walt Disney Executive Committee to be ambassadors for the year. So we got to open up Disney's Animal Kingdom. We got to launch the Disney Cruise Line. We got to meet Disney legends. It was a lot of fun, and I represented Disney in just about every capacity. Internal events, from opening up, the new cafeteria in Disney's Animal Kingdom, to going on TV in Texas as part, with Mickey and Minnie, as part of a Christmas parade. You name it. We got to do a lot of really cool things that year. That was also the year I met my wife, and that was the year that I actually would begin to think about starting a family and moving elsewhere. And so my last role with Disney, I was a recruiter. So this kind of ties into what I'm talking about today. I recruited for Disney's internship program, but I was located in Western New York. And I went to all these colleges all over the state, from Buffalo to Potsdam to Binghamton to Albany to Plattsburgh to Syracuse, Rochester, all over the state. And I recruited college students to come work at Disney. Great job, a lot of fun. Just, it was a lot on my schedule. I was away 20 weeks out of the year, working 18 hours a day most of the time. And at the time, my wife was pregnant with our first child. And so I started looking around, and it broke my heart to leave Disney because I loved it so much, but I wound up getting a job at Moog. And it's funny because I heard about this really cool company, Moog, but most of the people that I knew didn't work there and didn't really have any idea what we did. So my first job at Moog, I was a staffing specialist. So I recruited co-ops and interns. I recruited professional positions, everything from engineering to supply chain to IT to finance to HR. I did a lot of that stuff, mostly just for this East Aurora site. It's funny because when I started in 2001, I was the only recruiter. And now we have a team of about maybe 10 or 15 recruiters just here in East Aurora alone. That's how busy you are. That's how much we've grown. Let's see here. I then became an employee development manager. So I moved my career up in the HR food chain, if you will, and started getting more involved in the operation. I went to the aircraft group, and I supported mostly our aircraft assembly and test. And I did that for about 8 years. That was a really cool job. I did everything soup to nuts HR, hiring, selection, training, development, coaching, counseling, performance management, terminations, you name it. I was basically facilitating that process for the management team and a group of employees of about maybe 220 employees. I had the opportunity when Moog was going into looking at changing up their ERP system, which is Enterprise Resource Planning System, to become a manager of change in communications, which was really cool. But I only had the job for 4 months because then Moog realized they couldn't really afford that program anymore. So I became an HR manager in the aircraft. So aircraft said, hey, come back. And I was the HR manager for our aircraft commercial and commercial aftermarket sectors. So I basically, again, did the soup to nuts HR stuff for a larger segment. Before it was just our assembly and test operation in aircraft. Now I had basically aircraft commercial which was OEM, which stands for original equipment, which is like brand new, like buying a car brand new, or commercial aftermarket, which is like used parts, parts that are repaired and overhauled. We do a lot of that work. So I did that for a couple of years. And in the last several years, I've been doing employee relations and employee engagement type work. So I became the manager of our employee relations function. So I actually helped create that function and square it up, and had the U.S. team reporting into me. And since then, I've been doing it. I stepped out of the role and I wanted to become more of a specialist and get more involved in learning and development, which is what I love to do. I love training. I love doing training. I've been doing that at Moog in every capacity since I was a recruiter all the way up through to what I'm doing today, in little bits and pieces. And I just wanted to make sure I get to continue to do that. And I still do that even today with what we're doing with COVID. So that's what I do. That's where I've been, and it'll be 20 years this summer. So I'm pretty excited about that. And Moog has been a great company. It's been a great home for me. I've learned a ton, both organically through the organization, plus going through, seminars and to trade shows and to conferences, as well as getting my MBA. So really excited about Moog and what it's had to offer. And it truly is a unique company. Moog, most people are like, what does Moog stand for? They think Moog is an acronym, but it's actually the last name of our founder, Bill Moog. And when he created the company, he had a different idea. He had a different philosophy about how people should be treated, how people should work together, how they should collaborate and build relationships, which in the 1950s, nobody was really thinking about that. It wasn't really a common thing. And today it's much more common for, organizations and leaders within those organizations to think about how to treat people, and knowing that, hey, if you treat your people well, you give them autonomy and creativity, the ability to create, they will not only meet your expectations, but they're likely to exceed them. Bill was doing that, 70 years ago, which is pretty unique. And as a result, we've been able to build a company and a culture that stands out. The people say, hey, this is different. And the big test is our customers. Our customers tell us, hey, Mo, we'd rather work with you than some of your competition, even though your product's going to cost more, because we know the way you work together is going to equal a quality product, and it also translates the way you work with us and how you interact with us. And that's really important. So it all stems from our ability to maintain this culture. And a lot of that is hiring really good people who are good at what they do, who have an education and a knowledge base, but also have a desire to want to build and strengthen and nurture collaborative relationships, which is, when you're under a lot of stress and pressure, can be difficult to do. So let me tell you a little about careers at Moog. A lot of what we do, a lot of people think, well, you're just an engineering company, and that's true. We hire a ton of engineers. So if you want to get into a technical career and you want to become an engineer, Moog is a dream place for most people that get into that type of career. And it really depends on what kind of engineering you get into. So if you go into chemical engineering or biomedical engineering, that may not necessarily translate to what we do. We don't hire a lot of those folks, if any at all. But if you went into mechanical engineering, aerospace engineering, electrical engineering, software engineering, even industrial engineering or manufacturing engineering, we are hiring those people just in droves today. In fact, I do every other week, I do the new employee orientation for our new employees. I do the culture and philosophy piece, and I just did it on Monday, and we had about 10 or 15 people new in the room, most of them engineers. When I did it 2 weeks ago, we actually had to have an auxiliary room because of COVID to handle all the new people. So we are doing a ton of recruiting. So engineering is a great career. So if you're really technically oriented, you have a strong desire to get into the math and science fields, you like to solve problems, engineering is a great way to do it. We hire engineers to do product engineering, which is really focusing on product life cycle. Like if you think about, let's say we build an actuator that goes on an airplane that will control a flight surface. So this is getting basically to what Moog does 101. A good thing we do, for example, in our aircraft group is we build hardware that controls flight control surfaces. So for example, if you've been on an airplane before, the pitch, roll, and yaw. The pitch is the aircraft going up. The roll is that side to side, and the yaw is the turn that an aircraft does. And think about that all of spherical motion is controlled through controls in the aircraft. That's what we do. We create those controls. We don't build the aircraft, but we can create the controls that do that. And these controls have to work precisely, so that the pilot, whoever's putting the input in, knows exactly what they're doing, and when they put that input, it's going to do exactly what they say it's going to do. And we take a lot of pride in that, because what we design and what we build and deliver has to work every time. People's lives depend on it. If our flight controls fail, it could be catastrophic. So we want engineers who come in and know what they're doing, have a good solid foundation of the engineering curriculum that they've gone through, and can translate that well into whatever it is that they're doing when they come to Moog. So like I was saying, we have product engineers which work on like that product life cycle. Maybe they're working on products that are more legacy. We do project engineering, which is, this idea of taking, something from, hey, the design on a napkin all the way to fruition with the customer. And then design engineers who are basically doing that design on a napkin, saying, hey, what if we did this or that, or what if we designed it this way and solved our customers' problems that way. So that's really our engineering careers. We also have manufacturing and operations, people that want to be machinists. So maybe somebody says, I don't want to be an engineer, and I don't want to go to that type of schooling. And maybe you really like building things and creating things and being able to use machine tools and things like that, and hand tools and power tools and all that to do that. Our manufacturing operations are a great place to work. We are hiring for those all the time. People have built great careers. In fact, most of the people in our shop that did work on, CNC mills, lathes, numeric control machines, 6-axis machines, things like that, they've been doing this for 40. We even have half centurions. People have been at Moog for over 50 years working there. So, and they love it. And, they don't want to retire. And when they do, we say, great, we're glad you were here. And they kind of ride off into the sunset, but most of them, they really enjoy what they do. So we have manufacturing and operations. Assembly and test is maybe you're not machining something, but you're taking something that's been machined, either a make part that we built, or a buy part that we purchased from a vendor, and we're putting those together with very strict, very tight controls and measurements and specifications, and testing them to make sure that they work every time. John Scannell, our CEO, has said, if you think about this, like the things that we build, like a good example here in space and defense, we'll build a thruster that will go on a rocket. Now, this thruster will be built, it will be tested here in East Aurora, that will then be shipped to the customer. The customer will put it on their rocket application. It will go into this rocket, but it actually is a lander for something that's going to land on Mars. So this thruster is going to go onto this vehicle. It's not going to work, right? Or it's not going to be working at that moment. It's going to fly all the way to Mars. And then when the vehicle that gets it to Mars launches this other thruster vehicle, this vehicle's got to then land on Mars. And we have to fire these thrusters for 90 seconds. So we have about 4 of them on each vehicle that will allow this vehicle to descend into the Mars atmosphere at a rate that won't destroy it when it hits the ground. So it has to fire perfectly for 90 seconds so that whatever is going to land is going to have a nice soft cushion landing. We can then launch a rover, and that rover can explore Mars. If any one of those thrusters at any point didn't work, or fails, or doesn't fire for the exact amount of time it needs to fire, that whole mission could be scrubbed. So you think about time, energy, money, all those things. And it's really reliant on the people designing the product, and then the people building the product at each step, knowing what they're doing and having that quality orientation to build that, because it's got to work every time. And then we have supply chain roles. So this is people that help us bring in materials, everything from raw material to parts that maybe vendors make, everything from maybe some nuts and washers to manifolds to different types of maybe even disposables that we would need to put in our product. And this is, by the way, our products range from aerospace applications to industrial applications to commercial to military to medical. So we are in a lot of different fields. And so our supply chain folks need to be able to procure items from all over the world that are going to meet our specifications. And then some of the other careers we have that, of course, help to support all of this, HR, finance, IT, programs, contracts, all the folks that really help to support all of these operations are really critical in making this very complex machine called Moog work every day. So that's a little bit about the types of careers that we're hiring for. And I can say this right now, Moog is growing. We are, especially here in the Space and Defense Group, which is the operation that I support, we are growing leaps and bounds. We have a lot of new contracts right now. Some of it's military, some of it's space related. A lot of the people ask, oh, what are you doing in space? Well, NASA's actually trying to launch a mission to the moon and a mission to Mars. We're hoping to get on Mars within the next decade. We're launching deep space probes that are going to the moons of various planets in our solar system, like the moons of Saturn and the moons of Neptune, because they believe that when Voyager passed and took and then Galileo and some of these other programs passed, they found that there's actually conditions where life may be present on some of these moons. Now, not like some person sitting in a chair going, hey, I'm waiting for you, but more like that kind of life, if you could imagine. You can imagine, like, if you've seen those pictures at the bottom of the ocean, where you see those big, volcanic eruptions happening at the bottom of the ocean. If you notice those big steam clouds coming up, all around those, they're teeming with life. And what they've discovered is that there are these conditions on several moons in our planet's solar system. Not our planet, but the planets in our solar system. Some of their moons, there's some of these conditions that are right for them. They don't know for sure, but they want to send probes to say, hey, if we went below the ice here, what would we find? That would be kind of the coolest thing, to be able to find life outside of Earth in our solar system. Would be like, I don't know, discovering that the world is round for some people. It's kind of a neat thing. So anyway, so that's what we do. We do a lot of really cool things, and we're hiring all the time. So if you're interested in a really great company, a really great field, Moog is a great place. So you might say, how do I get to Moog? What do I need to do? So it's good that you have some really great skills in education. So knowledge, skills, and abilities that we look for. We look for two things: technical and behavioral skills. So the technical skills are those hands-on, or that education piece. What do you do technically that will add value? And so for people that are building our hardware, maybe it's that technical piece, that hands-on, that mechanical aptitude that's really critical. For our engineers, that even more so. Like I used to recruit our engineers, and we would ask questions like, so tell us what you got into, what made you get into engineering. And oftentimes it's that person's desire to find out how things work. So they'll tell us stories about taking apart the family VCR or the lawnmower. Of course, it may never work when they got it put back together again, but it was that desire to understand how things work, and that mechanical aptitude, and that hands-on, and that problem-solving capacity to want to do that. That's really what we're looking for. People that want to solve challenging problems, who relish at that idea, don't look at the problem as a burden, but rather an opportunity to say, hey, our customer wants to be able to get from point A to point Z, and they don't know how they're going to do it, and they really need some great technology to do that. How can we do that? That's our engineers and our machinists and our assembly and test folks. All of our folks really relish at the ability to try to solve our problem, our customers' most challenging problems. And all of this requires really good collaboration and a focus on relationships. This idea that I tell people at Moog, I say this as an HR person who's been here almost 20 years, I say, in any problem-solving capacity, the relationship is the most important piece. If you can have a really good relationship with the people with whom you work, you can solve any problem. I mean, and most problems are very challenging. But what oftentimes make them more difficult is maybe our inability to collaborate, or inability to build relationships, or maybe the finger pointing, or the backstabbing, or the blame thing. It's all those things that can create toxic environments. We thrive on the opposite of that. Instead, we focus on the relationship as critical in being able to help solve the technical problems that we have to solve, which requires a lot of, you see that word EQ, or the letters EQ there, that stands for emotional intelligence. So a lot of people talk about this idea of IQ, which is your intelligence quotient. And some people may be really smart, and they may have scores up into the 150s or whatever that is. But EQ is defined as a person's self-awareness and their social awareness, and how they then are able to build relationships off of that. So self-awareness is key. How do I take feedback? How readily am I able to be fallible and admit my mistakes? How receptive to feedback am I? And then how can I then translate into giving feedback to others who need that as well? And that's so critical, because oftentimes where environments become toxic is when people aren't self-aware and they're not receptive to feedback. And oftentimes walls get built up and defenses become fortified because people don't want to hear that. And it can be tough to hear feedback, especially feedback that's difficult. But in an environment where relationships are the key, emotional intelligence is one of the real critical pieces. In fact, one of the things we're doing right now, I'm working on a program. It's in with my fellow HR colleagues here in the Space and Defense Group. We call it Launch. So it's kind of like an early leader development program. And one of the things we're going to focus on is emotional intelligence and helping leaders understand what that means and why it's so important. So skills and education, there's probably a whole bunch more I could list, but I could probably have you here all afternoon for that, and I don't think you want that. So education is very important as well. At a minimum, we really don't hire people unless they have either a high school diploma or some equivalency to that. But most people that we hire have either an associate's degree in some sort of a technical field, or they have a business degree in either a technical field or some sort of related field, like a business field of some sort. So we hire people that have business degrees, supply chain degrees, HR degrees, IT degrees. So we run the gamut. Most of the people that we hire into engineering, they really need some sort of education in engineering. So they've gone to some engineering school, whether it's the University of Buffalo or Clarkson or Cornell or MIT or wherever. They require that. For our associate's degree, same thing. A lot of the people that we hire with associate's degree, they come out of maybe ECC. They've done some machining work there, or done some technical work, in manufacturing, engineering, technology, which is a degree you can get at ECC. So they come in with those degrees. And then some people come in, or they stay with us and they get this degree. They'll get a master's of science in maybe engineering, or maybe a master's in business administration or something like that to further enhance their career. So those are the different types of education that we require, and the different types of skills that we require. It's really, again, about having a good technical knowledge of what your field of study is, combining that with really great behavioral skills, focused on building collaborative, strong working relationships. And by the way, whether it's at Moog or anywhere else, those are transferable. That's no matter where you go, no matter what you do, if you build good working relationships and you focus on those as important, you can translate them to any organization, and any organization will want to keep you there. There's a value to having people who are not only good at what they do technically, but also really emphasize building those relationships, because people want to work around them. People want to be around them. There's value in that doesn't necessarily go on a company's 10K form and say, hey, we value our employees' relationship building skills at this, but it's so much more important in the everyday tactical operation. So that's a little bit about the skills and education. I also want to just end on a note here and then open it up to questions with a quote from Bill Moog. So Bill, our founder, was really all about, he was an engineer, by the way. He graduated from Rutgers University in New Jersey with a mechanical engineering degree. He created the patent on the original servo valve that would become our company's, the foundation for our technology. But what he's most revered for today, what he's most known for today, especially here in Western New York, when people talk about Bill Moog, they talk about the kind of company he built. And it was all about good people working in an environment of mutual trust. That was, you key on that thing, mutual trust. It's a two-way street. I trust you to do the job that you're doing. You need to trust me that I'm going to do it well. And if we have a problem, let's talk about it. And he believed, at a time when really people weren't talking about this, he believed if you created that environment, that people would not only meet those expectations, they would exceed it, and we would flourish. And so my hope for you on the phone, if you're a student or if you're a teacher, that you will find this wherever it is that you work or will work, because while it's great to get a salary and a paycheck, all of that's important, but in the end, what's really important is our ability to want to join a company where we can add value and feel like our contribution means something. and is important. And I can tell you, if you come to Moog, that's what will happen. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor to any questions, and that's it.
Yeah, Pete, we have a few questions here, and really great presentation, and I'm just kind of blown away each time I go to Moog. Just really impressed with not only the plant itself, but the things that you just talked about. I've been to a couple different presentations that you and others have done there for different groups, and the things that you expressed now is what I see in the people that work there, the energy, the excitement, the willing to collaborate and to work together, regardless what their expertise or field might be, but just as part of the team to be working towards a common goal and in a joyful kind of way. So
yeah, absolutely.
We've got a couple questions. Are there welding jobs available at Moog?
That's a great question. We do hire welders, but not very often. So I think, like TIG welding, things like that, we do, but it's rare. I would encourage you to, if you are watching our boards, to keep watching them. If we do need that skill set, we will put it out there. But it's not as abundant of a job category as, say, engineering or other types of manufacturing. So. But yeah, we've done it in the past. Yes.
Okay. And there's a question. Ethan had a question, and I don't know this. I know it's not in your department right now, but is there an automotive area in Moog at all?
So interestingly enough, Moog does not really do anything with the automotive industry. There is another company out there named Moog that does parts for like NASCAR and all that. So if you see like a NASCAR race, you'll actually see one of the decals on the cars. It says Moog, but it's a different font. It's a different company, not related to anything to what we do. But the areas where we have gotten involved in the automotive industry is mostly in the testing side. So in our industrial division, we'll create actuators that help to test cars. So for example, you can imagine a car on this big testing bed that will test the shocks. So these shocks are going up and down and being put to these really rigorous conditions. Our actuators will help do that. The other part of the automotive industry we are in, but it's really not automotive, it's racing. We have servo valves all over Formula One cars. So if you think about a Formula One car, this is a car that is so precisely designed to do something at such a rate of speed and turn and under such really difficult conditions that our valves are the only ones that could do it. So imagine changing a gear in like 1/20th of a second or something like that. It's like it's that type of thing that we do. But this is an interesting side story to that note. Bill Moog and Moog back in, I want to say maybe the 70s or the 80s, designed I would call it an automated suspension system for the automotive industry that was so good. So if you think about this, when you drive your car and let's say you get off on an exit, and that exit's got to curve around. And if you start going too fast, your car starts to give you a signal because you're starting to kind of lean over and, oh my gosh, I'm going too fast. You have to slow down. This active suspension system didn't make you feel that. So you would actually wind up going too fast around a curve. It was too good. And also it was too expensive. Oftentimes in automotive, parts are bid in at the lowest cost, and not because it's not safe, but it's just if you're thinking about producing tens of thousands of cars a month, you're not going to want to do it at such a high cost. And our suspension system was way too expensive.
Have another question about got several other questions, but what about the military, like missile guidance systems?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing all that fun stuff. In fact, right here in Space and Defense, we're working on a very unique missile guidance system that I really can't talk about. It uses, from what I understand, fiber optics in a different way that we've ever done before. We call it Project T right now because we can't really talk about it. It's in conjunction with a company in Massachusetts called Draper, and of course with the U.S. military. But what I understand this guidance system will do, so imagine right now, if you launched a nuclear missile, once you launch it, it's going where it's going. There's no way to change the trajectory of that missile. Well, we're developing a guidance system that actually can do that. So it's pretty unique.
That's cool. A couple other ones that are kind of related, I think. One question was, are there schools that you would recommend to attend that might fit better with a career at Moog? But then also, I guess, kind of tied into that, is it hard to start working at Moog, to get your foot in the door or whatever?
All right, so let me answer the first part of that. Moog, it doesn't really matter. I mean, as long as you go to let's say you wanted to be an engineer, if you went to, to quote The Simpsons, Hollywood upstairs engineering college, probably not where you'd want to go. But if you got a degree from MIT versus UB, in the end, most of the engineers that do really well come from schools like UB. They come from Clarkson. They come from maybe Virginia Tech, or maybe some of the better schools that if you went to U.S. News and World Report and you saw their college rankings, you get schools like Stanford, Georgia Tech, Illinois, MIT, usually at the top of those types of lists. And so if you wanted to go off and get an education, that's great. You might spend a fortune in doing that, and also those are very high stress environments. Whereas if you wanted to maybe go to like one of the state schools, you can, as long as you do really well. Like, one of the things that we require is we look at people to say, are you, do you have a good understanding of your curriculum? So a student coming out with like a 2.0 GPA may not get the kind of may not get a job at Moog, because they say, well, geez, did they understand, do they understand heat transfer? Do they understand thermodynamics and differential equations and all the things needed to be able to do engineering? Whereas if you went to, any one of the schools that I mentioned and more, and you did really well, and you coupled that, here's what I would say. Let's say you got, like a 4.0 or a 3.8 or a 3.5 or something like that, plus you did some, internships or opportunities where you got to take your education and do some experiential learning. Those are all really great things that we look for. Moog does have an internship program, and we do hire interns all throughout the year. Great way to get your foot in the door as well, because that's a great way to build relationships, show your work ethic, show your ability to build those collaborative relationships, but also showcase what you're learning in school and your grasp of that education. So, and the second part was, what was it again, Gary?
I was thinking ahead a little bit here, so I kind of lost.
Sorry.
Okay, is it hard to get your foot in the door? I think you kind of answered that a little bit with the other part of the question that you.
I'll say this: Moog's interview process does have a rigor to it, and rightfully so. We want to make sure that we hire really good people who have, like I said, a good knowledge of what they do. I'll tell you this: when I joined Moog almost 20 years ago, it was I had a 45-minute phone interview. I came in and I had a 4-hour interview with 2 people, so 2 hours each person, and part of that was a tour. Then I came in for a whole day where I called it the gauntlet, where they ran me through everything. And I interviewed probably with maybe 7 or 8 different people. And by the time the day was done, I lost my voice. It was really that type of process. So it was rigorous, but that Moog likes to do that rigor. So if you're good at what you do and you have a good, like I said, foundational knowledge of what you're learning and your expertise, and you also have showcased that you can build good, solid, collaborative working relationships. Is it hard to get into Moog? Yes, but I think you could pass that kind of rigor.
Hey, just to go back on what you said about internships, at what level? Are there opportunities at the high school level, or are they primarily college?
Primarily college. We, prior to COVID, excuse me, we used to do, maybe some shadowing opportunities, but we typically don't do internships, especially all of our internships are at a paid level. So typically you've got to be at least 18 years or older to do that. So.
Okay. All right. We've got several more questions here.
Sure.
Is there a career group in Moog for graphic designers?
Yes, there is. It's a very small group. We have our own graphics department. So, and this is the department that basically helps create and design the look for Moog. So when we go to trade shows, when we post, advertisements for jobs, when we do anything that, either internally or externally that kind of represents who we are, this group is the one putting that together, and they do a really great job. But it's a small team. And most of them have been in that team for like very well tenured team that have been doing that for years. Although I want to say they hired a person maybe about a little less than a year ago. So keep an eye out for the boards. They're not very common because it's a very small department, but it is a very unique skill set. That's the other thing too. It's not a skill set we have anywhere else in Moog.
Okay. There was one earlier that asked, and I guess this depends on the different types of positions that are there, but do a lot of it was kind of a general question, do a lot of the positions involve sitting at a computer and doing computer work most of the time?
Well, I'll say this, we rely heavily on computers to do a lot of the day-to-day work that we do, whether it's designing things, sending emails, doing spreadsheets, Word documents, writing things. So there is absolutely a good element of work that's required at sitting at a computer or standing at a computer. So some people prefer to stand. So we have desks where people can stand at a computer. But what I love about Moog is a non-union environment, which means there's a lot of greater opportunity for engineers and technicians and manufacturing people to really collaborate and work together and get out there in the operation to work hands-on with each other without having to worry about violating some sort of union contract. So it's really been a great thing for us. With COVID, we've had to really distance that. So COVID, we've spent a lot more time on a computer doing like I would anticipate if we didn't have COVID, this talk that we're having right now would probably be something we would do in person. We would find a venue and we'd bring people in and we'd kind of sit down and talk. So I think COVID has reduced us to doing a lot more of that because of the desire to want to keep people safe and to keep our distance.
Okay, there's kind of another related question. Does Moog provide any software training, or would you learn the software before going into Moog?
Great question. And more often than not, you would learn what you would need to learn here. So we don't so for example, let's say you're an engineer and you want to design, you're a design engineer. We use Unigraphics, but if you learn at a different company using maybe SolidWorks or Pro E or something like that, they're different software, but the idea is the same. It's to learn that shouldn't be much of a trick. So it would be much more difficult for us to try to find people who have every little box checked for what they need. We want to check the big boxes. Do you have the technical background? Do you have the behavioral background? Softwares, processes, those are all things you can learn relatively easy over the course of time. Okay.
Another one that I think is really important. As a matter of fact, is Victoria asked the question, but I think it's a good question for everybody because I think it's something everybody's involved with. How much of a role does a candidate's social media presence play into hiring and promotions decisions at Moog? Do you look at social media sites for people that you hire, or I think that's really important in these days.
That's a question I don't know the answer to because I'm not actually part of the talent acquisition department. I don't know. I can tell you this. I don't think that they're combing them because I don't know if we have the time to do that. I think we would maybe go there if there was something that we needed to be alerted to, or if somebody said something, hey, I just saw this. But most of the time we're not doing that. When it comes to social media, we want people to be able to have their own lives, and Moog has felt really, strong about that. But the only time we're ever really doing that is, for example, if you're already a Moog employee and you go out onto social media and you say something that's, disparaging or inappropriate, and you are associated with Moog. So if, let's say I went out on Facebook and I said, hey, I'm a Moog employee and I want to say this really bad comment, Moog could say, hey, Pete, you can't do that because you're associated with Moog. But if a person goes out and creates their own Facebook page and has nothing to do with Moog, we tend to not know and may not know what that is until maybe somebody alerts us to that.
Okay. All right. What about, and I think, well, there might be one more here that, okay, I think that's it from the chat room so far. If people want to look and see, I think on your website, you have a career page.
Yep.
And what's the website address?
I believe it's just go to www.moog.com. I think it's /careers. You should be able to find that, or yeah,
Okay.
/careers.
Okay.
You should be able to find that, or do a search on Moog Careers. It'll come up probably in Google search. And yeah, all of our careers, and you'll see, you can then sort them by location too. So maybe you said, hey, I'd really like to work at Moog, but I'd love to work in California. Well, we've got facilities in California. We've got facilities in Virginia. We've got facilities in Ohio, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Florida, North Carolina. So we've got places all over the country, all over the world, actually. So you could actually sort and filter on some of those opportunities if you said, hey, you know, I want to get out of Western New York. Let me go to California. Some people do. So.
A question that ties into one of the previous ones about software and stuff. What programs and software do you use at Moog?
Well, it really depends. You know, for some of the basics, of course, we use the Microsoft platform. So, you know, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. We're getting into Teams now. We used to use it. We still use it in some capacity, a program called Skype for our collaborations, but Skype is being phased out. We're going into Microsoft Teams now. So we're just starting to get there. That's why I said we're fumbling around. It hasn't become muscle memory yet for us. But you know, depending on your job, you may learn an enterprise software like SAP, which is a resource planning software. You may learn you know, design software depending on what you're doing. If you worked in HR, you'd learn you know, our HRIS systems. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you're in the supply chain, there's different purchasing tools that are used, as well as, you know, customer interface websites, you know, so you can go in and work with customers who need to order parts and you know, through that whole process. So it really runs the gamut. So I always encourage people, you know, it's funny, I have 3 children, and one of the things I'm always encouraging them is to, you know, learn, take computer classes, you know, anything you can do to build up your basic knowledge of how some of these different applications will work. Because, like, for example, if you learn how a web application works, more than likely you can apply that to just about anything, because most of the things that are done these days are done in some sort of a web platform.
Great. I don't know if there don't appear to be any additional questions in the chat room. And can you take off your screen there, Pete, and maybe we can go back to the full view of everybody?
Sure. I'm going to stop sharing here.
And just if it's okay with you, Pete, if you have another minute, if there's anybody else who has any questions that just wants to unmute themselves and ask Pete before we go, we've got a couple more minutes here. Are there any other questions? You just unmute yourself and ask Pete. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Okay. Well, why don't we, Pete, that was a great presentation. I'd really like to thank you. If there are any questions that people, is it okay for people to email you, or is that all right? Or
psergi@moog.com. Yep.
Pardon?
psergi@moog.com.
Okay, and you see Pete's name, how it's spelled. Yep. And well, thank you very much for doing this. I think it was very, very informative. We had a really good turnout here today, and I'm sure people, again, we are recording this and people will look at it at another time. So again, thank you very much. Thank you to Absolute Care for their support of this. And we also have other presentations. We have Melissa Lauricella, who's in Human Resources.
Yeah, I know Melissa. She's great.
Yep, you know. Yeah. And she's with Astronics LSI, and she'll be doing a presentation on February 24th, Wednesday, February 24th, about careers at Astronics and some of the stuff that that Pete addressed, but in a different industry, different company. And then on Wednesday, March 10th, we're going into the trades field. We'll have Bob Nowak from Robert Nowak Heating and Air Conditioning, and Chuck Snyder, who's with Charles D. Snyder and Sons Construction. So we're getting in a little bit into the trades in the next two sessions. So again, Pete, thank you very much for doing this. It was really great. Appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who joined us today. And we hope you all have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary. Have a great one, everybody.